Hello, old chum. If you stick around, you'll hear about the Batman. He's kind of a big deal. The Fantasmagorium is pleased to welcome you to Capes, Cowls, and Crusaders, a show about the Batman. Oh, it's been a long road getting from there to here. We started with Michael Keaton, and now we have the Clune Dog, the Cluninator, Batman as both Bruce Wayne and Batman with no discernible change in vocal inflection. Arnold Schwarzenegger is also here. Alicia Silverstone is not Barbara Gordon, but she is named Babs. Oh, who plays Robin, Kat?
Chris O'Donnell.
Chris O'Donnell is back with rubber lips. Uma Thurman is about to kill Bill. And Nikki Cat is there?
Somewhere.
Spike. But speaking of people who are here, Kat is here. I am here. I am Scotty R37, and today we are at the end of the Burton Schumacher, A Batman. How are you doing today, Kat?
Good. Quite at the end. We still got to get through this review.
We do. I'm anticipating. Last week I made grand proclamations as to how I was going to react to this particular movie. And not as good as I thought it was going to be, but not as bad as I thought it was going to be. I thought I was going to like it better than Batman Forever. That did not happen.
I think they're both about the same in different ways.
Yeah.
We talked about our problems with Batman Forever is the editing and things being out of sequence and the stuff they cut out of the movie, which kind of cheapens some of the other aspects of it that doesn't really work. And then in this one, it's just, it felt very just blah. This is, if you're watching this movie with a group, it could be one of the greatest unintentional comedies of all time. It's a really hilarious group movie to watch. Watching it by yourself, it's a drag. It just feels very stale. Val Kilmer didn't want to come back. I'm not sure if it was because he didn't like the first movie or whatever, but he didn't come back. And I guess it made sense at first to cast George Clooney because it's like, oh, he's a guy who he's really popular right now. He kind of plays the same character in everything he's in. He could be perfect as the Bruce Wayne Playboy type character, but it's a very stale performance. Probably the stalest performance I've seen him give in any movie. It just doesn't really work. And it almost in response to the people who probably didn't like the lack of action in movies like Batman Returns, it doubles down on superfluous action scenes for the sake of action. It opens doubling down on the whole Batman 66 thing of, Commissioner Gordon's like, there's a new villain in town. His name's Mr. Freeze. He's got a big freeze gun. He freezes people with things. Okay. And he's got a bunch of henchmen who are always miserable, who don't like it at the snow cone place, which seems to be like a nod to the Iceberg Lounge, which I kind of think is neat. But it's like, okay, you steal diamonds for your cryo suit and your science experiment. You're not stealing cash. How are you paying your henchmen, and why are they hanging around since they're so miserable? One of them I noticed when they're all dressed up like the hockey team, one of them almost looks like he's got a version of the Predator mask, and he has dreadlocks too. And I'm like, wait, what? Backtracking on that. He's got a cool truck though. It looks kind of like one of those concept cars from the 30s with that futuristic type look to it. That was pretty neat. The Batcave is bigger this time. It's been remodeled, so you have the Robin symbols on it. And even though Batman and Robin kind of made a good team briefly in the climax of the last movie, they came up with this arbitrary story this time where Bruce doesn't trust Robin at all, and they're constantly sniping at each other. And like you said, Barbara Gordon's here. Or not Barbara Gordon, but they basically took her and decided, well, let's have her be Alfred's niece, despite the fact that he's much too old to just be her uncle. Maybe a great uncle, but not just uncle. They have this subplot in there where Alfred's trying to locate his brother, which never gets resolved. And I always forget about that aspect of the movie. What's that about? I do like the subplot with Alfred kind of dying and her wanting to get him out of there. How is he like family if you're paying him to be here and all that stuff? But Victor Freeze, some have argued that it's a difficult character to put in live action because it's inherently goofy. Schwarzenegger's hamming it up, and he has fond memories of being in the role. Likewise, Uma Thurman has fond memories of playing Poison Ivy, saying it was a lot of fun. She's definitely the version that you would see in the animated series, hamming it up and all that. But again, it's like arbitrary villain team up for the sake of, let's have more villains to sell more toys. And that's where the word toyetic was being used a lot more often. This one was specifically geared towards selling more toys. And it's just, you have the Batman credit card, which a lot of people talk about, which says the name Batman and the expiration date forever. It's like, okay, clever. It's like, that's your little nod to the previous movie. Okay. And you'll see Riddler in Two-Face's costume at Arkham Asylum. And I guess because Schwarzenegger's in the movie, he made sure that Jesse Ventura got a cameo as one of the Arkham guards.
I was surprised that you didn't get to see Sven Thorson, because Sven Thorson usually shows up whenever Arnold Schwarzenegger shows up, but not this time. But yeah, you do get you get two governors for the price of one.
Yeah, and of course they do the whole character assassination thing with Bane, played by wrestler Jeep Swenson, rest in peace. That I don't know what the inkling behind that was. It's like, oh, he's a new character, he's popular, but let's just take. It's like, did you even read the Nightfall trilogy, or did you just look at the cover and what he looked like and decided, oh, he's big, he's muscular, that must be it. He must be an idiot, and that's kind of what it is. They have another villain, Fluoro Man, I think he was called, but they just portray him in his pre-insane mode as the mad scientist, Dr. Woodrow, running the weird plant place in South America where Bruce Wayne cut the funding. And it's like, okay, other movies have done Batman movies have done this too, where they cast lesser villains that kind of like John Daggett in Dark Knight Rises as Clayface in the comics, and that kind of thing. But I mean, the movie was just. It's plot. It's a bunch of plot and action scenes that doesn't really coalesce into much of a movie, and I could see why it killed the franchise.
Yeah, and before I think there are a couple of contributing factors to that. I think that there were a lot of corporate fingers in pies to try and make this as profitable or as successful as Batman Forever was, because after the departure of Tim Burton, no one wanted to touch Batman Forever with a 10-foot pole. When it became popular and successful, biggest movie of the summer that year, everyone and their brother wanted to be a part of it. And yeah, even with the Bat credit card, I know it's a meme with the Nostalgia Critic and everything, like the Bat credit card, but that was promotion. That was, they probably had a Discover card that was available, or a special edition Diners Club, or maybe it even was an American Express. I don't know. But yeah, a lot of this was that we just need the toys. And as I mentioned, I've been going through the Blu-ray on this one, and aside from just the inherent apology that comes with getting the Blu-ray, you get Joel Schumacher saying, if anyone walked into this movie really anticipating Batman and Robin after seeing Batman Forever and you were disappointed, I am truly sorry. All I wanted to do was entertain, which kind of breaks my heart every time I heard it. And I tried to find a clip of it. I couldn't anywhere that I could actually clip or download. And that in the juxtaposition of what was going on with the animated series. The animated series came out sort of pre-Batman Forever, and it had a more faithful tone to what Batman fans would know as being Batman. And Batman Forever still has stakes. You still have the haunting of Bruce's parents being killed with the parallel of Dick Grayson's family being killed by Two-Face. But this one just feels like we're superheroes and we're doing a job, and all of the teammate stuff that happens, but with, as you mentioned, the mistrust from Batman towards Robin. Now, before we get any further, because I know there's not going to be a place for this anywhere else in the show, sadly, Joel Schumacher passed away at the age of 80, and I believe that was last year?
2 years, 2020.
2020. One of his last interviews that he gave before he passed away was to Vulture, and that gentleman exclaimed or proclaimed that his conquests in the bedroom rivaled that of Wilt Chamberlain. Joel Schumacher claimed to have had 20,000 sexual partners. He said somewhere between 10,000 and 20,000, but he didn't like to kiss and tell for anybody who allowed him the favor of sharing a bed with him. I just wanted to give prowess and ups to Mr. Schumacher for his lovemaking ability.
And more arrows to be slung at his bullshit explanation as to why they have so many close-ups on the costumes and the way that they do with everything. He's like, oh, it's just the human form. It's accurate. It's like, really? Is that really why you did it? I mean, funny thing, Tim Burton was interviewed last year for the 30th anniversary of Batman Returns. And he's like, yeah, people complained at the time. They're like, oh, it's too dark. The executives are like, this is too dark and too sexually overt. And then they replaced it with bat nipples. Go fuck yourself. That's what he said in the interview. And I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
Because it's true. It's like, yeah, it might not be. I mean, this one is erotic, but not in a way that's as perverse as Batman Returns, because of course the Poison Ivy character is all about trying to seduce them and stuff like that. But it feels very tweeny and teeny, especially with Robin and the rivalry they have over Poison Ivy. So I guess the parents weren't as upset about it. And then again, not many people went to see this movie. But this was also an era where studios seemed to think that throwing more money at a movie would make it better. Like when they found out that this was going to open, rival studios found out that this was going to open against movies like Patriot Games or Lethal Weapon 3 and stuff. They threw more money at those movies to increase the budget as if that's just going to make it better. And that, again, shows how wrong-headed the studios were back then. The 90s was not, especially the first half of the 90s, wasn't really a great era for studios. They were losing a lot of money on films, and less people were going to the movies because the movie qualities weren't very good. And you can see why with studio meddling to the level that we had in Batman Forever and Batman and Robin. But I will say this in its defense. I do like that. I think Mr. Freeze has a better story than Two-Face did in Batman Forever because they do retain the motive is there. Admittedly, it is bizarre that, oh, he's a new villain in town, but he just hangs out at this snow cone place in the city. And it's like, oh, he's escaping in his car after trying to kill all these people and nobody's going to the snow. It's like, okay. And I don't know. I mean, I guess I could do a rundown of the movie, but it wouldn't take very long because, again, it's not really story. It's plot. You begin with the Commissioner Gordon having Batman and Robin go stop Mr. Freeze at a museum where he's attempting to steal a diamond. And at one point, Freeze says, kill the heroes. It's like, that's literally, it's like they're breaking, it's like, it might as well be a fourth wall breaking type of exercise at this point. And it's funny because yesterday I listened to Kevin Smith and Mark Bernardin's commentary for Batman Returns. And one of the things they kept complaining about is that there's not enough Batman in the first 30 minutes of this movie. It's like, where's Batman? Why are we seeing all this kind of crap? Why aren't we seeing Batman fight fools? I'm thinking, I'm guessing that was a response a lot of people probably had back then. And it's almost like this movie is a direct response to that. It's like, you want Batman fighting fools? Here it is. No content. It's just more, Batman, fight, all that kind of stuff. Like Batman 66, you just jump right into it. So Freeze escapes. Bruce tries to blame Robin because Robin didn't hold back and he gets frozen by Freeze's, freeze gun. And in a weird moment, Freeze had the opportunity to finish off Batman, but he seems to get more sadistic pleasure out of the idea. You're going to come after me. You're going to save the boy. And then he leaves him anyway. And it's like, you could have just finished him off, but okay.
I'll kill you later.
Yeah, I'll kill you later. So he escapes, and the rivalry starts picking up between Bruce and and Robin. We then cut to South America, where Bruce Wayne had been financing this this research facility dealing with a lot of plants. Pamela Isley is there, very very similar to Catwoman in a way, where she's very disheveled and lacks confidence and just kind of aloof about everything. And she's not allowed to go into the Gilgamesh ward where her boss works. And he's taken her Venom project from her botanist work, and has turned it into basically the Bane program, where he's taken this serial killer, forcibly injects him with the venom to turn him into this mindless monster, and he's trying to auction it off to these dignitaries or military representatives from other countries. And when she stupidly tells him off, like, oh, I'm not going to be a part of this, blah blah blah, he just tries to kill her. And typical crazy supervillain origin, she gets hit with enough chemicals and plants that she just magically turns into Poison Ivy and kills the scientists the next day. And when she finds out that Bruce Wayne was the one sponsoring them and cut it, she decides to go to Gotham City to try and appeal to continue this because she wants to save the plants. And she goes to a big press conference where Bruce is unveiling the brand new observatory, which makes no sense that this observatory is right in the middle of the city, where you're not going to see much because of all the city light. And a huge continuity error later in the movie where when you look out front where the telescope is pointed, you see the city is right there, all the skyscrapers and everything. But later in the movie, when it falls, it's like on a cliff into the ocean. It's like, wait, what happened? It's very bizarre. So she goes there and she barges her way through the press conference and appeals to Bruce about we have to save the plants and forget the people. And everybody's kind of laughing at her. And this, god-awful reporter who just gets on my nerves. She's like, oh, we have other people to protect us from stuff like that. Batman and Robin, they'll protect us even from plants and animals. And I'm like, oh my god.
But that's Gossip Gertie. That's the widow of Bob Kane.
Yeah. And so
The nepotism.
Yeah, for sure. Bruce also is introduced as having like a girlfriend in this movie, Julie Madison, who's actually from the comics for a change, but
really,
he doesn't want to commit to her because he doesn't want her to be in danger, but they don't really express that as much as make that as obvious as the reason why. So we then find there's like more. We then find out from Mr. Freeze going back to his place that his motivation is that he's trying to save his wife, who he keeps cryogenically frozen in the back of the freezer. Bruce Wayne and Robin find out about this in the Batcave, where they're researching who Victor Freeze is. Like, he's trying to find out trying to buy time to cure her disease, something called McGregor syndrome, which I think they made up for the movie. And Alfred is starting to suffer from this as well. Then Alfred's niece shows up, and she pretends to be this goody two-shoes person who Alfred's been supporting for 5 years after her parents died. Oh, I go to Oxford, all this kind of stuff. Turns out she's a biker girl, like sneaking out at night, and Robin kind of enjoys that. They meet Coolio at this biker rally, and he's credited as the banker. And he's not doing anything crazy. He's just standing there taking the money for all the bets for the races. Mm-hmm. But apparently they decided to retroactively say he was going to be Scarecrow in the next one. It's like, okay. They have this big, bike race thing, which kind of evokes some of the weirder, colorful gang stuff in the previous film. You have Poison Ivy and Bane going into this Turkish bath where you once again have these really weird, like glow-in-the-dark paint, like kind of neat makeup design on all these guys, and they just take over and decide to make it her lair. I thought the effects for her plants were actually pretty good. Still holds up.
Yeah, not bad.
Yeah, not bad. The 4K transfer, by the way, for the movie is unbelievable. It looks like they shot it yesterday. But interesting, Batman actually does catch Mr. Freeze halfway through the movie after a big car chase. They're stealing more diamonds and shit. He goes to Arkham, and they have him locked up there. He can't really get out. Poison Ivy comes up with this evil plan where she's going to break him out. And he's like, well, what do you want in return? And she doesn't want to tell him, and he decides not to call her on it because he's like, great, we're going to get out of here. But Bane can't break through the walls because it's reinforced steel. So Freeze, with the aid of his suit, freezes the pipes to cause the pipes to burst, and it blows a hole in the wall. And as they're jumping out, he's like, oh, I hope Mr. Bane can swim. And they jump this distance, which is so cartoonishly far. There's no way anybody would survive the fall. But okay. They escape. They have to sneak back into Freeze's lair, where Batman and Robin and Gordon are like taking over the place and researching and seeing what's going on. And Poison Ivy tells Bane, or tells Mr. Freeze, you don't have to worry. Your wife's going to be fine. You go take care of Batman and Robin, or you go get your diamonds to get more power for your suit. I'm going to take care of Batman and Robin. And so she uses the pheromone trick on them, which I should have mentioned. They also had the big donation party where she met Mr. Freeze, where everybody's in costumes and they're doing this creepy kind of bidding on the women as they're donating. And it's like, what exactly is going on here? Are they like auctioning off like for dates, like a weird date night type thing? And of course, everybody being won over by Poison Ivy because she's like using the pheromones while Bane is hiding in a gorilla suit and says stupid shit like monkey business or bomb and crap like that. So anyway, she unleashes the pheromones on Batman and Robin at Freeze's place. And it's funny because Batman tries to stop Robin by throwing him into this vat of mint ice cream, which kind of echoes what happens to the Joker in Batman 89. Then Gordon comes in and he's like, what happened? You let them get away. And I'm thinking, she literally just went out the back door. He could just turn around and go follow her. It didn't get away anywhere, And then Mr. Freeze does this interesting thing where he walks into the lobby of the iceberg, or I keep calling it the iceberg line, to the snow cone place. And there's a big lever on the wall that says heat, and it's in heat mode. He lifts it up, and it causes it's starting to cool the building down. But for some reason, all the cops are starting to choke, like their oxygen is being cut off. I'm like, what's going on here? They're just kind of odd. So he steals his diamonds and gets his suit back, rendezvous with Poison Ivy back in her lair, where we find out that she actually apparently killed Nora Freeze deliberately by pulling the plug because she wants to motivate Freeze to take revenge on the whole city and the world, create another ice age so that she can supplant it with the plants will take over the world type thing. Okay. Freeze falls for it. Turns out his wife isn't dead. Batman like saved her off screen. Meanwhile, Barbara discovers the Batcave. She and Robin are kind of bonding a bit. Alfred apparently, in the short time she's been there, anticipated she would find the Batcave and made her a bat suit. It's like I was like, okay, isn't he dying? And he didn't have any clue she was going to show up. He was totally surprised. But in the 2 days that you've been here, I'm going to anticipate that you're going to find this, and I want you to be this. And even Bruce asked Alfred at one point, "Do you think I'm pigheaded?" And he's like, "Well, yeah, you are, but why does he want him to?" It's like now he's trying to encourage her to go fight crime, and it's like okay. And so Batman and Robin eventually go to Poison Ivy's lair, and they get captured. Robin goes there on his own because Poison Ivy lures him there with a Robin signal, because he decides in the midst of the fight at the snow cone place that I'm tired of being with you. I'm going to go solo. And so he goes there. But it turns out he's smarter than we thought, because he goes there and he uses the rubber lips as like a test to see if Bruce was right about her being, seducing them and not really caring about him. Mm-hmm. And sure enough, he was right. But she ends up knocking him into the pool of like venom toxin or whatever. And Batman shows up and she gets him tangled up. And then Batgirl shows up and saves them both. And they have this great joke where it's like, oh, she knows where we are now. Well, we're going to have to kill her. Well, we can kill her later. We have to save the city. So Bane and Freeze are driving to the observatory, and Freeze is like, remember, Mr. Bane, don't let anybody tell you different. A big gun is always what counts. And so they go to the observatory. The scientists look at him. He's like, who's this nut job? And he freezes both of them. Bane starts placing all these bombs. Freeze takes this weird device he's been building, this freeze engine, and starts freezing the whole city with the observatory. Batman and Robin show up, and they have this plan to bounce the satellite signal for the observatories around the world. Kind of like, reminded me of Die Another Day a little bit with the laser thing, the way that Gustav Graves said it was supposed to work. And it's like they're doing the same kind of thing. But Freeze ends up fighting Batman, and they thaw the scientists out to keep cheering them on, like the cheerleaders on the sideline, like, go Batman. And when he gets beat up and shit. Eventually the bombs go off, the observatory is destroyed. And I guess the idea of Bruce finally coming around to trusting Robin comes from Batgirl and Robin apparently falling off the observatory and him deciding not to save them, and they save themselves. And Bane grabs them both and starts strangling them, but they use both of their feet to kick the hoses off, which causes them to shrink and like wither up and just, I guess, die or something. So then they come up with another plan to hack into the computers to redirect the satellites directly to melt the entire city, which works. At which point Batman reveals to Freeze that, no, your wife is still alive. I'll have her transported to Arkham. You continue your research there, and but I need to know how to cure McGregor System Stage 1. And he appeals to him on that, and Freeze gives him these 2 canisters, which he keeps close to him, and he's like, give this to him and call me in the morning. Because apparently Freeze's master plan was that he was going to freeze the city and hold it for ransom, so that way he could get the money to continue his research. Something that kind of comes back in Batman Begins with the Scarecrow. But and so Freeze goes to Arkham. Batman tells him that it was actually Poison Ivy who pulled Nora's plug, and for some reason they're in the same cell, which I don't understand the logic there. It's like,
well, and he's wearing the suit too. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, he's wearing the suit, and I guess he could just do what he did last time to blow his way out. But I guess he doesn't have an incentive now because his wife's going to be, kind of held hostage, kind of like Khan and Into Darkness. Oh, I have to do what you say because you got my cryogenically frozen people with a gun to their head, basically. So then Batman and Robin, they go back to Wayne Manor. The cure works. Alfred's cured. He never apparently finds his brother, and it's like, yeah, he's dying, or he was dying, but he's so ancient anyway that it's like, and so, but then they team up and they decide they're going to be Batman, Robin, and Batgirl for the rest of time, and it was set up for, I guess, a sequel in that way, and that's really it. There's nothing, again, it's a running the gauntlet of a bunch of total camp Batman 66, all plot, barely any story. They hinted at it a bit with Mr. Freeze and the arbitrary arguing between Batman and Robin over trust issues, but Uma Thurman is one of the highlights. She's definitely hamming it up, having a good time. And Schwarzenegger, there's a little bit of a story there for the character, but it's just the dialogue's bad. I was thinking that because it's more coherent a bit, or more structured, edited better than Batman Forever, that maybe it would be better, but it's really not. But then again, it's really close as well, because I really didn't like Two-Face in Batman Forever, and I was just waiting for the Jim Carrey brother to kind of take over, and I wanted the Chase Meridian character to have more of an impact. So I kind of feel, but then again, I didn't care for Val Kilmer as Bruce Wayne or Batman, but then I don't like George Clooney that much either. So it just kind of,
All right. Well, before I'm gonna go from least important to most important on my rising scale. If you'll indulge me, before we get to that, I just wanted to say hello to Terrier Tiberius Mork. I haven't seen you recently, my Norwegian brother. Cool down. Thank you. Lemon Pie is here. Hey, Lemon, greetings. And it's always a pleasure to see Antiderivative Jill saying hello to Terrier and Lemon Pie. Thanks, Jill. Thanks for being here. Oh, and also, way to go today on Captain Fandom Nerd. That was a fun stream you were on this morning. So let's start off with Elle Macpherson as, what was her name?
Julie Madison.
Julie Madison. Now, I'm not familiar with the character from the comics. What run was she from? Was that just sort of a...
I don't know.
From time to time?
I literally just clicked on her name because it was highlighted on the Wikipedia page, and it says she's from the comics as one of his girlfriends, but she only has like 2 scenes in the movie. At the observatory, when they're announcing the new telescope, and then there's one scene at Wayne Manor where they're kind of discussing their relationship, and he's kind of reluctant to take the next step or whatever, and then you just kind of don't see her anymore.
Well, and that's the scene that I thought was the most interesting, and also I think that's supposed to highlight. So Bruce Wayne and Julie are having dinner or hanging out and romancing in front of the giant fireplace, which is now apparently Bruce Wayne's modus operandi if he wants to, get down with the ladies, show them the fireplace.
A much smaller fireplace, I noticed, than the big, nice one from Batman Returns.
Well, it's also a smaller dinner table than the one in the original Batman from 1989 as well. But she says, we've been dating for a year. How do you not know that he's Batman after a year? That was my first complaint.
Okay, is she living in Wayne Manor or not?
I
don't think, it doesn't seem like it.
I don't think so either. I think that we're still dealing in a time of, you start living with a partner once you get engaged or something.
Or how Alfred kind of kept the secret of having a niece who he's been secretly supporting for the last 5 years. And she just shows up and Bruce and Robin are like, oh, it's like, hi, secrets, Alfred? He's like, well, this place is all about secrets.
Yes. He does sort of wave that away. So Julie doesn't know that Bruce Wayne is Batman after having dated him for a year. I don't understand. But that is the least important. The second least important is, oh, that poor Pat Hingle. Like, he came back to collect the check, obviously. It's very gracious of him to return. It's not like Pat Hingle was doing much of anything. Before the Batman movies, I think the only thing I actually seen him in was a one-off episode of Cheers. Anyway, but he comes back, and it is apparent when he doesn't have lines that he's just being like background, and he kind of looks grumpy and shifting from side to side. I feel bad for Pat Hingle.
I think he had more lines in this movie than in Batman Returns. Like, and more to do. Because he first shows up on the computer in the Batmobile where he's telling them about Mr. Freeze. He then shows up he's at the charity auction donating the diamonds, and he's there at the Snow Cone Palace place, and then he's there at the big observatory launch towards the end of the movie when Poison Ivy sneaks back in disguised as her little reporter thing when she uses the pheromones on him to get the keys so she can access the bat signal. So I think he had more scenes in this than in Batman Returns, where he's only in the beginning, and then when he shows up to show this doesn't prove anything, when he has the Batarang as evidence, then you never really see him again after that. So I think he did have more to do, and he's a good sport for coming back for such a thankless role, because this obviously is not even close to the Gordon from the comics.
Well, and maybe that's how I feel about Pat Hingle, is that it was just thankless. And he did look somewhat bored. Cinema Gulp is here. Hey, what's going on, Cinema Gulp? Ben?
You say, well, we'll go with this one first. And he says, this movie is the poster child for a studio wanting to sell toys and not caring one single wet fart what the movie is like. Yeah, and it's bad when even the studio executives apologize for it years later as well, which was a surprise. when they're like,
Well,
yeah, and I can't. One of them said that it's not. It's like, I promise you, as bad as this movie was, we were not trying to make a bad movie. Which, of course, you're not trying to make a bad movie. You're trying to make money on it. You want to make money, and this was so bad that it knocked, canceled. The sequel was actually not going to be called Batman Triumphant, as many thought. It was actually going to be called Batman Unchained, which with the Schumacher, and they'd even put out a press release for it promising more silliness, and I'm like, what? Really? Is that what people want? And apparently not.
well, and just to speak to what Ben is saying, as being the poster child for wanting to sell toys and not caring about what the movie is like, I agree, but I disagree. Again, going through the interviews and the special features on the Blue with Joel Schumacher, he jumps in front of a bunch of bullets in terms of people blame Akiva Goldsman for making this movie too silly, and he wrote it and it was darker, but Joel Schumacher was trying to lighten it up and trying to bring a bit more levity to it and making it not just toyetic, but also for the kids. And I think that with this, the money making behind it, it was definitely designed to be a Mattel hook, line, and sinker. It was made to sell toys.
Well, it's kind of like I mentioned earlier with Poison Ivy. She is the PG version of Catwoman from Batman Returns, because not only is she the origin is similar, being all ditzy and everything until she comes into herself as Poison Ivy, but there's her whole bit is that, she keeps insulting men and the whole manhood thing, and I'm woman, hear me roar type thing, and even Batgirl insults her about that at one point. About her her femininity, and you give women a bad name and crap like that. It's like, basically you're beating up on Catwoman from Batman Returns with this character, and trying to make a PG version that will sell more toys. You even break the fourth wall by having her say, "Oh, I'm not a fighter, I'm a lover. That's why every Poison Ivy action figure comes with a Bane." And it's like, okay, but I thought that was odd too. It's like, we're in the totally into the camp mode that we have to kind of mock our previous characters in a way. Which that kind of seemed like what they were doing with the Poison Ivy's present. Again, the whole eroticism, if you will, with her being more teeny bopper type, with the whole Robin and the jealousy thing, as opposed to the overtly S&M sexuality of Catwoman and Penguin from Batman Returns, and even calling out even Barbara or even Batgirl specifically using words like you give women and femininity and stuff a bad. It's like, dude, you're breaking the fourth wall too. It's like, what are you doing here?
Well, and Batman does say, it's like, and who are you? It's like, Batgirl. That's not awfully PC, isn't it? Shouldn't it be Bat person or Batwoman? And then it just goes over to like, it's me, Barbara. And so, but yeah, there are a lot of winks at the audience. Yeah, it's, again, I'm trying to, it's a light, colorful, popcorn, make fun of, campy movie that harkens back to the 60s show, although apparently they had no intentions of harkening back to the 60s show. It just sort of ended up that way. I think they were just trying to make a maybe it's just a product. That's what they were going for. They wanted butts in seats, but it honestly does sound like Joel Schumacher did respect the character to a certain extent. And there was we'll discuss it a little bit when we get into Clooney. There was a little bit of the taking away of Bruce and Batman's sort of angst and the ghosts in his closet and the haunting of his parents' death. And it's very, very obvious that that's not something that Clooney was interested in doing, because Batman's a billionaire who has all the best toys and beats up anybody he wants and dates the most beautiful women in the world.
That's kind of funny, because in this one, in both Batman Forever and Batman and Robin, Bruce Wayne has a lot more screen time than in probably Batman 89 and Batman Returns. But in Batman and Robin, it's treated almost like, well, you know everything about him, so we're just going to make it as stale, bland as possible. Whereas in Batman Returns, Tim Burton had zero interest in Bruce Wayne, which is why he didn't play up the dichotomy between him and Oswald, as the obvious parallels between the two of them, and leaving it to Shrek to point that out. Whereas Shrek is more of a Bruce Wayne type character, albeit corrupt than he was. Whereas in Batman and Robin, it's like, okay, you put Bruce Wayne front and center again, but nothing about it feels like Bruce Wayne. He's just this very stale guy, and And even in the suit, it's like, I have problems with Robin, and we got to fight another villain. It's like George Clooney said he even apologized to Adam West once, and I'm like, whoa. I mean, it's bad, but it feels like something that if Adam West were that age, like younger in the 90s, that he would be on board with it, maybe. Because I don't know, I've never heard Adam West's thoughts on this movie, but for George Clooney to apologize to him makes it seem like he thought he even did that. Clooney even thought he did a disservice to the Adam West version of it, which I don't think he did. I mean, yes, the movie as a whole it kill the franchise, but I don't think it's definitely, I thought it was just doubling down on the stuff from Batman 66 as opposed to insulting it.
Well, and there was an interesting perspective throughout the discussions of the movie on the disc, is that once you had 89, which was the gothic sort of darker, moodier version of Batman, and you get to Batman Returns, which obviously turned up the darkness a lot, made it more sexual, and sexual in a tactile nature. Like, it's people touching, groping, licking people, and it's a very sexual movie, hands-on,
touching people, groping people.
Whereas this, like with Batman and Robin, I didn't notice it well, except for my ogling of Nicole Kidman. I didn't find it to be like, look at these people, they're very pretty, and we want to admire their shapes and whatnot. The sexual gaze, if you will. Whereas in this one, it was very much with like the topless drum people, dudes, and everyone's all oiled up. And whenever there is something to look at that is sexy, it is heightened. And it is much more of, a Victoria's Secret catalog or the lingerie section of a Sears catalog than it was.
That's why I always thought that scene at the auction was a lot creepier than any of the overt sexuality in Batman Returns. Because it's like you said, they're oiling all these people up, trying to make it look really. You have all these young girls, everybody's oiled up, looking all like this, and you have these like old bigwig rich people bidding thousands of dollars on them, and it's like, this is kind of creepy. But whereas with Catwoman, it was natural with her character. With Penguin, it was kind of natural with him, and it felt more real and didn't seem as because they're just weird with each other and weird with other people. But here, it was just like, these are supposed to be the normal people in Gotham, and they're doing this, and it's like. And coming from a studio which is like, this movie's too dark, you're too overtly sexual, blah blah blah, and that's why Tim Burton kind of ragged on it some more. He didn't think Batman Returns was as dark as Batman 89, which I don't know, maybe in terms of set design, I'm not really sure where that's coming from, but this was just it's like, here, sell more toys. I mean, I don't know. Jump in the comments. Was Poison Ivy's comment about every Poison Ivy action figure coming with a Bane, was that true in the actual merchandising? I wouldn't think so.
No, I don't think. I can double check and see.
I doubt it, but I thought that was kind of funny.
Ben says, I don't blame Joel, by the way. They asked him to make what he made. I think that he was in creative control and having a big laugh about it and enjoying it. Like, I think that he felt he was making a big summer blockbuster. And you mentioned in terms of throw more money into it. They used to this is the big, that was part of the marketing. Like, if you'll remember that people were banking on Titanic failing in 98, whenever it was.
And 6 months, that came out 6 months after this.
Yeah. Well, to save the box office, I suppose. But it was something where it's like, okay, this is the biggest movie of the year, or this is the biggest movie of all time. It was part of the promotion to it, as opposed to, and obviously, with the internet not being around that much or at all, you didn't have the people savvy or feigning or faking the savviness on what Hollywood economics are, because I don't even think Hollywood knows what Hollywood economics are. They just, oh no, we know what we're doing. There wasn't, it was like, oh, it's a big movie, we're going to see that all on screen. Oh, it's big stars. Great. I get to see Arnold Schwarzenegger, who was admittedly on the downslope of when he was on top. I don't know. It seems.
Well, it's kind of funny because he said he was actually doing another movie for the studio, and they kind of walked over to him one day on set and asked him if he'd just be in the movie. Like, this is in the era where they're, again, not thinking very clearly about who they want to cast or why. Hence why they decided, oh, let's let Coolio play Scarecrow in the next one instead of casting an actor. But Joel Schumacher did say that if had they done Batman Unchained, he was going to make it like darker. Like the Scarecrow's toxin wasn't just going to be for the sake of, you know, silliness and stuff. He said he wanted to use that as a way to really dive into Bruce's fears and have him hallucinate about the Joker. And Harley Quinn was going to be there to seek vengeance against Batman for killing. In this continuity, it would have been her father. And if he was going to try and darken it up a bit, because again, as we have to keep reminding people, is that it was Tim Burton who chose Schumacher in the first place to be a producer on Batman Forever. But obviously, while Schumacher, yeah, he may have creative control, but the studio was obviously happy with what he was doing, and there was still clearly a mandate there to make it toyetic, and he gave them what they wanted. And you know, like you said, nobody's trying to make a bad movie. It's just kind of how it turned out. But I remember the marketing was all over the place. And I didn't see it when it came out, but I remember the billboards are everywhere, the ads and that kind of thing. But it just, I mean, some of the visuals are impressive. I mean, the design of the city is still, again, it's a bit like Batman Forever on steroids in terms of just how crazy and colorful, and the statues, which seem so out of place in certain areas. Like, it's so clustered together too and claustrophobic at times. And the city does admittedly feel a bit bigger than it did in Batman '89 and Batman Returns. But I mean, I don't know. I think the whole toyetic thing, while it wasn't, that's not a term that was coined with these movies. It was around before them. But that, to me, that was the only impetus behind this project. Because again, it was kind of like like in Batman Forever, we discussed that, you know, Riddler teams up with Two-Face because he needs goons to rob these jewelry stores or whatever. But really, they have them team up because they want an excuse to have two villains in the movie for the sake of selling more toys. And they did the same with Poison Ivy. It's like she could have just planted her plants there in the forest in South America and it would have overrun the whole country. Like, given the way that it works in the movie, it's like she didn't need to freeze the whole city, make it an ice age. It's just like, well, we need a reason for her to go to Gotham and a reason for her to be in this movie and have Mr. Freeze. So let's just have them team up. And it's like, okay, you know, there's not much.
No, and you're absolutely right. It just seems like they were putting in, and I don't even think that they were trying to put more villains in. I think they were trying to put more stars in. They wanted to have a fuller cast so that people would come out to see the movie. Clooney was on the rise for sure, but he wasn't George Clooney yet. He was still, like, I think while filming this, he was still doing ER, and so he was working from Monday to like.
Yeah, I don't think it was probably not until Ocean's 11 in 2001 where he really kind of blew up and became, you know, the super popular George Clooney. And that's when he started directing movies after that too. So
yeah,
I mean, he was popular, but he wasn't, you know, at that stratosphere yet. But it seems kind of funny because if you were to ask me, like, say if they were to made this movie 10 years after, I would have thought George Clooney would be a natural choice in a way for Bruce Wayne because he's kind of lives like Bruce Wayne anyway. You know, he's an international jet setter, 5-star lifestyle, plays the same character in every movie, kind of the playboy thing. But he tones all of that down in this movie for a very super serious, kind of stale performance that doesn't feel like Bruce Wayne at all. I mean, a little bit of like Val Kilmer's trying to be. He was a little stale as well. But I think the way Kilmer did it, he's playing it a bit darker because he's like, you know, capturing the Batman aspect of it a little bit better. Where here it's just like, we just cast a guy who's popular right now and just put the costume on him and, you know, redesigned the costume with this weird silver on it, which just kind of looks odd for Batman. And, you know, here we go.
I think, was that like the thermal suit?
Yeah, because it's like a dark, it's not like it's not even fully black. It's like dark gray, and then it has like the silver on it around the eyes and around the chest pieces. And then they gave Robin a new motorcycle. They have the two versions of it. They have the main Batmobile, and then they have one that kind of has actual skis that destroys Freeze's truck. It's like, of all the things that Mr. Freeze's freeze gun truck can freeze, it can't freeze the fins on this bat boat that Batsky. It just really is like the actual Batsky boat. Because he flips it over. It's like, really? Everything else gets frozen solid, but not this. You know, so it was very camp and silly, and you know. And again, Alfred having a suit ready for anticipating she's going to find the Batcave and making her Batgirl. I was like, what? And I was like, okay.
Well, let's rise the ranks then and go to Michael Gough. Something that I never noticed before that disturbed me incredibly is when Alicia Silverstone's Barbara shows up. Alfred says that it is the daughter of his sister, Margaret, who he has nicknamed Peg. And they sort of he talks about Peg wistfully and has a picture like signed by her. And I was like, is he kind of hot for his sister? Now, I understand later, because I watched the deleted scenes, apparently not brother and sister, just close, very close, but there was an age difference and Peg was younger. That's how you get Barbara. He was trying, and then, okay, so then the brother Wilfred, who apparently is in Africa, although we don't know, the Maharaja, he was being a valet for the Maharaja or something.
He was in
India, my mistake. And
floating palace corduroy thing that goes around the rivers, which is why it says it's always hard to find them. And in fact, at first it seemed like that story was there just to provide bonding between him and Barbara. But the fact that even when Barbara's not there, he's like in his room on the computer recording a message for him and everything. Like, is this going to come back in some way and have something to do?
I think it did.
Like with the McGregor syndrome or something like that. I mean, I wasn't really sure.
No, the thing here's, and I think this is just specifically for the audience, and it's a contrivance to make it so that Barbara gets into the Batcave, is that I think that Alfred was recording something for Wilfred so that in case Alfred died, Wilfred would come and be Bruce Wayne's butler. But, and so when he's in bed, like he goes from it's not gentlemanly to discuss one's ailments, and then the next thing he's laid out in his bed like he had a stroke or something. And he says, and then Barbara comes over and he gives Barbara the like super high-tech CD drive case, and then she opens it up. So I think that was just a plot device so that we could get the information from Alfred to Barbara so Barbara could show up in the Batcave. That's what that was. We didn't even need to see Wilfred. We just needed the note to Wilfred to somehow stumble into Barbara's hands, is what I took it as.
Yeah, because she's trying to find out what the secret is, and it's like, oh, access denied. And I'm thinking, if you had that many access denied, many failed password login attempts, there's going to be a security thing saying, "You're sorry, we're locking your account until you can prove it's you." And how subtle to have the actual name of the password right there written. This portrait so prominently displayed right next to the computer. Love Peg. It's like, and you're right. The photo, even the photograph he has of her is like she's like some celebrity type photo. I have a photograph of somebody actually downstairs, very much like that from the 50s or the 60s. But you're right. He does speak of her wistfully, and I'm thinking, okay, I know George Clooney was 35 when they filmed this, and Alfred has been with them longer than Bruce Wayne has even been alive. And Alfred, Michael Goff at this point was in his 80s, or I think he was in his 80s or late 70s. So it's like, how long has it been since you've seen Peg? You know, it's like how long is it, and how long has it been since you've seen Wilfred? And because and it seems like you haven't known Wilfred or been with him for so long, you think he's just going to drop everything to come and be Bruce's butler, you know. It's like, okay, I mean, yeah, you're right, it is a contrivance, which is why it's there, and there's not much to think deeply about because
it's Batman and Robin,
right? Like, again, like at least in Batman '89 it made sense that the Joker's goons were probably being paid from the mob money, but in Batman and Robin it's like, why are these goons even hanging out with Mr. Freeze when they're so miserable all the time? And they're watching old Christmas specials and being forced to sing Christmas tunes with Mr. Freeze in his bathrobe. And you have Vivica Fox cameoing it's like, let's repeat the fact that Two-Face had two like hot girls, Drew Barrymore and what's her name is his sidekicks. So let's give Mr. Freeze one. Vivica Fox is only there for like that one scene, I think. And then you don't really see her after that. It's homage the Iceberg Lounge for the sake of doing that. Because my favorite version of the Iceberg Lounge is the one from Arkham City, which is just this really posh, exciting place, which they've since carried over into the comics. But it just, yeah, I mean, design-wise, it's very similar to the last movie. It's very much structurally trying to do a lot of the same things. But I think Batman Forever tried harder to try and give a bit more nuance and purpose to Bruce Wayne's story with the Chase Meridian character, even though most of it ended up on the cutting room floor. Whereas this, again, was just all like plot and more merchandising opportunities than it was a story. Like, I remember even listening to the Kevin Smith's commentary on Batman Returns, they kept complaining, none of this story makes sense. There's zero logic, blah, blah, blah. And it felt at times like they were actively ignoring the story because most of their questions could easily be answered. And it's like, that movie at least had a story, which Batman 89 didn't. Batman Forever kind of has a story. It doesn't hold together as well. And then Batman and Robin it's just bleh. It's like all plot. It's like, whereas that one that Tim Burton did, well, yes, it's unfortunate that Bruce Wayne's barely in it, but it's still a story. Here, it's just relentless plot. Like in Batman 89, the only sense of a plot or a sense of a story is the Joker's origin story, at which point it just kind of goes off the rails and it's just random scenes of either action or Vicky dating Bruce and the Smilex plot. And here
I wouldn't say it goes off the rails. I would say it would be a character study of Jack Napier and Bruce Wayne and their parallel lives, one trying to save the city, one trying to destroy the city. Vicky Vale is caught in the middle, and then the story coalesces with the discovery that Jack killed Bruce's parents, and it does sort of blossom into something that feels like a movie. You're right. The story is stronger for Batman Returns. Batman Forever, again, you have parallel stories, but then you've got the two villains just trying to emulate Jack Nicholson from the first one, but it culminates in who are you going to choose to be, Batman or Bruce? And he's like, I can be both. And then that's how Batman goes forward. With this one, it's just, here's where you're going. Here's where you're going next. There's a crime over here. We have a villain who's come up from, Corto Maltese, which I like to pretend.
Hilarious when he's going over the photos of when they've come from South America, and it's almost like Bane and Ivy posed for a photo where she's like got the trench coat pulled over half her face with the sunglasses, and Bane's there with the looking like he's like from Casablanca, because you have the plane right there and they're standing there and he's got the same thing with the mask on, Luchador mask. Like, what the hell is this? That came in 2 days ago, Batman. And it's like,
says why is right on the plane, South America?
And I'm like, why is Commissioner Gordon finding this out instead of Batman? It's like that's actually the one bit of detective work that Gordon actually does that's of any use in these films. But that was funny. But I do admit that Poison Ivy's lair and seeing all that stuff, that even in the South America scenes, was very much reminding me of Arkham City and Arkham Asylum, where you get to go into the depths of there and see all the poison ivy. How cool that was,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The boss lairs.
Yeah.
Jill says, I think he might have been a good Batman with better direction. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so, because I think Clooney's got the talent. Again, I think he would have made, if they let him be a bit more of his charismatic self, I think that would have made for a great Bruce Wayne. And Batman, I don't know, because I've never seen, because George Clooney he's tried to do action movies before, not very often, very limited, but he's not really action star material. Like, I remember there was one called, very dully titled The American, where he's an assassin, and like, I think he's in the Alps, or he's tasked to stay there for a bit to assassinate somebody, and he finds out he's going to be on the target, and he gets to get a little bit of action in there, but which is why I don't think he's a good fit for Batman. But as Bruce Wayne, I thought if they let him be his charismatic self, that would have been nice. Yes. But no, and Chris O'Donnell, I think they could have done more with Robin than this very tweeny, you don't trust me. Oh, she loves me. You're just jealous because she likes me more than you. I'm like, weren't you just agreeing with Batman 5 minutes ago that she used pheromones on you? And they're like, yeah, because they do talk about that when they're in Freeze's lair. And he's like, oh, I can't believe we both fell for a bad guy. And Batman's like, bad, yes. Guy, no. And it's like, okay, so Robin acknowledges that he knows he's been duped. And then in the next scene, you still can't stand it that she likes it. I'm like, why are we doing this child? I actually like the Robin story from Batman Forever. And here it's just like, okay. It's like they felt the need to shoehorn conflict. I guess they thought it would make it more interesting, but it wasn't very well thought out. I figured a more natural conflict would come from the fact that Alfred's dying. He's probably under a lot of stress. And what happens when he finds out what his niece is actually into, that she's not the goody two-shoes prep school kid, but is actually, oh yeah, I got kicked out of school because I'm a underground biker who nearly gets killed at night raising money because she's trying to help Alfred, but she never really gets around to repaying it, or she doesn't really retract that belief that, oh, you're not a family, you're paying him to be your butler, blah blah blah. And I take it when she finds out that they're Batman and Robin, she understands it more. But it's like, it's still, I mean, I think it would have made more natural conflict if he finds out that she's into this whole biker thing, and because he knows Robin's into that too, it'd be like, aha, it's like, you did it, you're a bad influence. And that would have, I think, driven more of a wedge and been more of a believable conflict that would be interesting for the story than just this tweeny pheromone jealousy type crap.
Well, and when discussing the film, Joel Schumacher said that he was happy with the conflict that was going on between Bruce and Dick in Batman Forever, but now that they had sort of decided to be partners, they needed something to drive between them. Otherwise, they just would have been shaking hands the whole time, in Joel Schumacher's own words. It's just a contrivance to make it so that they're not at each other's throats, but again, so that there is some sort of manufactured conflict to make it so that they're not just, good work, old chum. Lemon Pie says, this movie was so bad it made me angry. I've been there. I felt that.
Can you even imagine what it would be like if that film had been released today? And let's say the timeline has shifted, where the Nolan movies and the Ben Affleck version and the Reeves version didn't happen yet, and they made like that. All of these 4 Batman movies were made today, particularly Batman and Robin, with the online thing being the way it is. Can you imagine? Just, oh my God.
Well, I would like to say that there was the inclusion but change of the original Batgirl character, so people wouldn't have liked the change of that character. It is an extremely diverse cast of people of many walks of life and many ethnicities. I think that it probably would have been rather poo-pooed in the modern era. I don't know if it's as bad as Velma.
It's not diverse.
I don't think there's a comparison.
Well, I mean, it's Batman and Robin isn't really diversely cast.
No, but you've got Vivica Fox, and you've got everybody who's going on in the auction area. You've got the 2 doctor scientists. So
it's like cameos, but the main major characters aren't. Not that I care, but I don't know. But yeah, I do recognize. I think the one scientist, the man, I think he was in one of the previous Batman films in a different role.
Both of them were in Batman Forever. Like as a guard and Bruce Wayne's assistant, I think. And those are just people that Joel Schumacher works with and tries to put them in as many movies as possible. And same with the one of the Mr. Vargas from Spider-Man. He's in there too. He's betting like $500,000 for one of the ladies, and then bids on the guy with the mustache in Spider-Man on the board of Oscorp.
Oh, okay. Oh, one of the Oscorp guys. Okay.
Oh, and that Leahy gentleman as well.
Yeah, he's in all of them. I didn't see him in this. I know he's in this one, but I keep forgetting that. I don't really see. His most prominent cameo, of course, was in The Dark Knight.
Yes.
And then in Dark Knight Rises, because he actually had dialogue in both of those.
Well, hey, power gets you power. Affinity is here. We drove out to the coast so we could listen. I'm glad that we are available on FM radio in the lovely country of New Zealand. Black Philip Alvarez is here. Hey, Phil. I get that it's a bad movie, but I've grown to appreciate it more over the years, and Schumacher took full responsibility for it. Clooney just shits on it constantly. Yes. And that is something with Clooney. I noticed a lot in the behind the scenes stuff is that he's holding a cane and limping quite visibly. I think he had some issues in terms of getting injured on set, or because he was working 7 days a week, split between Batman and Robin and ER. I think that he got injured. It's obvious, like it's almost Star Trek level of stunt doubles going on with it. And like even in the auction scene, and they're pulled back, you can tell it's not Dick Grayson.
Dick Grayson.
No, Chris O'Donnell. And it's like, okay, I guess you just, you got the stand-ins to come in. And there are interviews with Chris O'Donnell. He's like, I had a good time on the first one. The second time felt kind of rushed, and I was going through weird stuff at the time. So it just seemed like something that not everybody was a big fan of it, or in the quick turnaround for production of the film, or so I gathered from the features.
Yeah, he does bag. I mean, it's not so much him. Yeah, he did at one point say that the film was just a big waste of money. And I think it's him apologizing also because he's probably aware, like a lot of people are, of what fandom can be like nowadays. It's like, okay, just keep apologizing for it. Just keep apologizing. Like at one point, in some years ago, he was on the Graham Norton show, and Graham asked him, "Have you ever had to apologize for Batman and Robin?" He's like, and he laughs at him. He's like, "Dude, I've never stopped apologizing for Batman and Robin." And it's like, I saw his new movie, Ticket to Paradise, and in the end credits, they're playing like the gag reel, and in a scene where one of the characters is supposed to knock on his hotel room door, it's a guy dressed as the Adam West Batman and knocking on the door and giving shit, and he's just having a big laugh about it because it's still that's something that's going to follow you for the rest of your life.
Well, and I think his Oscar speech for Best Supporting Actor, I think it was like Oscar winner, Emmy winner, Batman, and that's how he figured was going to be his tombstone. So he's always referencing it. I saw an interview with David Letterman where he's like, "Oh yeah, Batman. Me and Arnold Schwarzenegger ruined that franchise for about a decade." So yeah, he brings it up all the time, and whether I take it in good fun, and I appreciate self-deprecating humor, especially when it's Clooney. If it weren't for John Hamm, I would still have a thing for George Clooney. But that's for a different podcast.
You can like both, Scott. There's no rule against that.
Nope, it's Scotty's choice. One will live and the other will be taken away.
Black Alvarez says spot for the film for sure, but I won't say why.
He says I have a soft spot.
Soft spot
for the film, for sure, but I won't say why. Hey, man, if you as long as it's special for you, and as Jill says,
fine. Nobody's upset with anybody for liking the things about the movie. Like again, I said I like Poison Ivy. I thought she was eating up the scenery and having a great time. But and I did like the design of some of the stuff in Gotham, and some of the effects held up. The transfer looks great for 4K. So yeah, that's fine to still like things about it, even though it's a franchise killer. And I think the real apology tour didn't really kick off until the promotion for Batman Begins, because everybody was wondering what this movie was going to be, and so they started tracking down the people responsible for the franchise killer, and that's when all of those apologies started. And that's when it kind of, really took off.
Well, and it wasn't until the release of Batman Begins that you start to get a DC Renaissance, like that was DC Renaissance, if you will, because up until then things had sort of chugged along that nobody really wanted superheroes, or they were sick of it, and that's when you got your more like, well, then you get Blade and you get the X-Men and Spider-Man, but DC didn't really recover until Batman Begins. Phil says Clooney is too charismatic for action films. I just don't think he's coordinated enough. I don't know if I've seen him actually go full hog. Lemon says hello to Finity, and Finity doffs his cap to Lemon, and ahoy hoy.
Okay, Jill. That's right. Akiva Goldsman was the studio person who said that we didn't mean for it to be bad. I swear nobody was like, this will be bad. He elaborated the film was initially intended to be darker in tone, where Schumacher, his first direct quote about it, one of his direct quotes in 2017, he says, "I want to apologize to every fan that was disappointed because I think I owe them that. A lot of it was my choice. No one is responsible for my mistakes but me. I was scum. It was like I had murdered a baby," he says, in regards to his initial reaction to the overwhelmingly negative public response.
Mm-hmm.
And then, interestingly enough, yes, Uma Thurman and Arnold Schwarzenegger said they had fond memories of working on it. And then, of course, the quote from Tim Burton saying, "You complain about me, I'm too weird, I'm too dark, and then you put nipples on the costume, go fuck yourself." And then the big one is Kevin Feige even commented on this film. He said that Batman and Robin is arguably one of the most important comic book films ever made because it was so bad that it gave everybody at Marvel pause for how you should proceed with comic book movies going forward and taught us to respect the source material. And that's what they did when they started moving towards pre-production on X-Men. Because he was at the studio at the time in a different position, but he's like, that's what the thinking was around Hollywood with, like, while DC and everybody thought, oh, franchise killer, this shit's done. And Marvel, they're like, no, we can fix this. We just need to, respect your source material. Like, had they done that with, like, what year was it that Mask of the Phantasm came out? Was that 95 or 92? It came out, I think it was 95 on Batman Forever, because critics said it was better than the live-action Batman movie that was out at the time.
Sorry,
I think it was 95. Let me check.
Oh, I've got it right here, but it's so small.
Yeah, it's let's see here, Mask of the Phantasm.
93.
93. Okay, so 93, and they were saying that that was considered better than the other Batmans going on at the time because, again, they respect the source material. Even the animated series is great. And so that was interesting that Kevin Feige, of all people, would comment on it and say, no, we were paying attention back then. And that's why, love it or hate it, that's why Marvel went in the direction that it did, because they just are looking at, not thinking about selling toys. It's like that stuff will come naturally if you do a good job on your story and respecting your characters.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And again, I think it's something that we'll run into when we take a look at the Kevin Conroy, Bruce Timm movies that we're going to take a look at. But it was far more, even with the stylistic choices that were influenced by Burton and Schumacher, it was definitely more true to the source material than the movies were. Far more respectful to the source material. Jill says, simple diversity doesn't mean something is woke ever. Such a despicable misdirect. Oh, no, I didn't say it was woke. I said it was diverse, is what I said. Affinity says, so what are we talking about? I'm here for the buffet. They don't have buffets anymore. They were outlawed a year ago. Not even sneeze guards can save buffets, but thank you. Tom's here, friend of the show, Tom Jr. Jackson. I like this movie because it almost has the feel of like a Batman 66. Yeah, I had that idea myself, and then I found out that they weren't even trying for that. And I thought it had been some sort of not a regression, but an adaptation of that feel. But apparently they just stumbled into it and made it, I don't know, kid-friendly, as opposed to trying to delve into the psyche of the characters.
It's kind of like when I pull up the Batman Chronicles, which is a reprinting of all the Batman comics in chronological order. And the very first Batman story, The Case of the Chemical Syndicate, yes, it's for kids, but there's still a detective story there, and it's not so overtly goofy at times that Batman kills people, sure, but it wasn't this level goofy, like. And then when the Joker showed up in 1940, it felt dark, even compared to what they'd already had in the comics at that time. And so this felt more along the lines of what they were doing in the 50s and the 60s. In terms of, which is why I'm surprised if they said they weren't really going for Batman 66, because it does feel a lot like Batman 66.
Yeah.
In terms of the amount of hyper color and this action and here's a new villain in town and that kind of stuff, which is why I'm surprised that George Clooney apologized to Adam West. It's like, why? You're in the same kind of vein as his was. I mean, I don't really understand that, but yeah.
Well, and I think it had a lot to do with the, as I mentioned at the top of the show, just in terms of a lot of fingers in a lot of pies, trying to make this as profitable for as broad an audience as possible. And at that point, you do just end up being like, why don't you just make it fun? Make it so the kids can take, or the parents can take the kids, and there's something for everybody. And so we won't have people bleeding from their mouths this time. And maybe we won't try and cause infanticide across the entire town, or wipe out the entire town for that matter.
Yeah,
but I do. Sure.
I was just going to say that in terms of how successful it was, it cost between $125 and $160 million for the budget. And that's just the production budget, not the marketing budget. And it only made $238 million. So that's 119 million after the theaters keep their half of the box office. So they lost money on that. And yeah, I think that was more of the impetus, was sell more toys, make it fun for kids. And kind of like we were saying that the studio executives thought that Batman Returns was going to be a funner movie. I have no idea why they thought it was going to be a funner movie, because they read the script, Whereas here, it's like they're trying to go for fun and which is nothing wrong with that. It's fine, but it still has to hold up as a story, and kids aren't as dumb as they seem to be thinking they are, because again, the animated series has much better storytelling and character, and that's primarily was again for kids. And whereas this seems like it's geared more at little toddlers, even though the romance stuff would probably go over a lot of toddlers' heads, which is kind of weird. So you have that mishmash of age appropriate stuff not necessarily being in there, and it's like, how many of the little kids are going to get understand the poison ivy stuff with a love pheromone? They're not going to get it. But at the same time, the whole frenetic energy and the whole pacing and plotting of this movie and all that is totally geared towards children. Like, little kids would probably be scared of the whole motorcycle chase sequence because of all the crazy designs and the hyper weird goons with the glow in the dark makeup and the creeps and stuff like that. But it doesn't fly for other older kids. And by older kids, I mean even 10 or 12-year-olds probably aren't thrilling as much to this as they would to say something like Mask of the Phantasm.
Well, and even I'm trying to compare this to Batman Forever to a certain extent, just to see what, because I kind of had higher hopes, but the tone was more, I don't even want to say grounded, but there was just something about Batman Forever that felt weightier in its subject matter that Batman and Robin lost because of the contrivances. Uma Thurman is doing like his Girl Friday sort of impression. It's like, oh, right, Caped Crusaders. And
yeah, a lot of critics at the time compared her to Mae West.
And which makes sense, because she was hamming it up, and she, like, in interviews with her, she said she didn't necessarily find the film to be that good, but as a working experience on how to conduct yourself and what you can do as a performer in a big budget bubblegum popcorn movie, she found as a valuable learning experience, which I find interesting, just for the same reason that I can tell that Tommy Lee, or not tell, but from the stories that I've heard, that Tommy Lee Jones wanted to call in sick every day that he was forced to go to set on Batman Forever. Uma Thurman showed up and said, okay, it looks like I'm going to be stereotypical. Now,
was that simply because he thought that he signed on for the paycheck and thought it would at least be tolerable, and then after a couple of days it's like, oh God? Or
yeah. And
he wasn't locked in. Yeah. Okay. So he wasn't like forced to do it against his will or anything. He just kind of thought it would be different than it turned out being.
Right. And again, this all framed under Joel Schumacher, director of The Lost Boys and The Client, who had worked with Tommy Lee Jones. And then the movie that Joel Schumacher made immediately after this was 8mm. Like, and he says in the audio commentary, he's like, people said that this was too light and fluffy and happy for a Batman movie. And he says several times during the commentary, it's like, come on, guys, it's a Batman movie. And that was the mindset at the time. It wasn't going to be a psychological character study of what the trauma that drives a rich man to become a vigilante and force of vengeance in the night. It's a Batman movie. And then he says, yeah, if you want to see dark, go watch 8mm. It's about snuff films. There you go. Like, he's capable of it. It just wasn't the common perspective of what you could do with that at the time. And like, this would have been pre-Matrix. So the sort of angsty alternative, well, it's the difference between the MTV generation versus the fighting the establishment generation.
You have Tom's comment still on the screen, by the way.
Well, it is still the both of us. Tom says, oh, look, it's Scott and Kat, his favorite drive time team. Well, it is late, but I'm glad that you are enjoying. And I'm assuming that this is a reference to my Clooney versus Ham, Scotty's Choice, in theaters now. And Jill said I'd watch that, except I already know how it ends. Tom says, as a matter of fact, if you listen to the commentary for Confessions of a Dangerous Mind, towards the end, Clooney goes, okay, now we do the commentary for Batman and Robin. Oh, and that's great. That's a great quote from Joel Schumacher. I was scum. It was like I murdered a baby. Hey, welcome to, it's almost like 1,000 lives screamed out in pain and were suddenly silenced. Like that is exactly where it would go nowadays.
Like a million voices suddenly cried out in terror and then suddenly silenced. I fear something terrible has happened. Yes, yeah. Batman and Robin has been released on the world.
Did something to my childhood. Jill says, I hope one day Akiva says that about Star Trek. Doubt it. Highly doubt it. It's kind of like what John Lennon asked Paul McCartney, how do you sleep at night? And Paul McCartney was like, on a bed of money. Jill says, oh, Schumacher said that. Sorry, I have no idea why I would think for a second that Akiva would take responsibility for everything. I mixed up who said the quote.
Akiva Goldsman did apologize. He's the one who said we didn't set out to make a bad movie. It's just it ended up being bad, and he did apologize for it.
Right.
But what was that John Lennon quote from?
It's apocryphal. It's apparently there was like a letter or interview or something that happened.
I was going to say, coming from the guy who's talking about how great it is to be a hippie, hippie traveling the country homeless type of thing while he's sitting on top of a gold piano in the Dakota building. It's like, okay, come on. It's like, that famous interview.
Oh, no, and absolutely. I adore hippies until they start getting dollar signs in their eyes, and then they just turn into the most vicious, patchouli scented motherfuckers on the planet. Cam is here. Hey, Cam, saying hello to myself, Kat. Hello, everyone.
Bill says they dialed up the cheese factor a lot more. More cheese than camp, especially with the Mr. Freeze puns. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
Dinosaurs, the Ice Age. It's like, oh
God. Apparently, there were 27 ice-based puns. So, okay, so then, and I want to get back. I want to rise the ranks because I think we only have 5 more people. Alicia Silverstone as Batgirl. Kind of creepy that her uncle made that suit for her. She got a lot of flack for apparently gaining some weight in the production process so that the costumers had to alter the bat suit, and they lashed out in the press. The press lashed back, and Joel Schumacher apparently was scrambling to being like, shut up, leave her alone. What's her crime? She had some pizza. And so, yeah, but Alicia Silverstone, I've seen Clueless ages ago, and aside from this and Clueless, she didn't really do a whole heck of a lot after this.
No, I didn't really know who she was I remember seeing her name on billboards and stuff, but I've never seen Clueless. I know. I'm not even sure if I've seen her anything else, because you're right. I mean, she was there very briefly in the 90s. I don't know. Maybe she was on a TV show or something. I might as well just check it right now while I got it open on the thing here to find out what happened to. I
want to say that it was part of an Aerosmith video. She was in an Aerosmith video with Liv Tyler, and that shot her more to stardom. I don't know if she'd done Clueless by that point, but I knew that's where I had initially.
Her film debut was in a thriller called Crush in '93.
Right.
She was in an Aerosmith video crying, and then she was in Clueless in '95, Batman and Robin in '97, and then was in a very brief NBC series in 2003.
Mismatch?
Yeah.
Yeah!
The stage credit. Yeah, basically there's not much here. Just really, a lot of direct-to-video type things and stuff like that. Just... Yeah, nothing much.
Okay, so that's Alicia.
But again, she was a teen idol at the time, so that's probably was again the thinking, because they're not thinking about casting necessarily the best. It's like, let's just cast who's kind of hip right now.
Yeah.
And Schwarzenegger, I mean, like you said, he's maybe on the backward slide of his golden age of his career, but he's still Schwarzenegger. That name sells. So that's there. And then Uma Thurman, of course, had done Pulp Fiction. Granted, that was 94, but she was still like, wow, you know. So of course they got her for that. And
well,
again,
and she had done more than Alicia Silverstone because she had been in Mad Dog and Glory with De Niro and Bill Murray, and then she was in The Truth About Cats and Dogs with Janine Garofalo. Like she's had a consistent career, and then obviously Kill Bills and whatnot. And she seems like she's having fun.
she's never bagged on the movie. She said she did look back fondly on it, saying she had a blast on the movie playing that character.
Then we get to Chris O'Donnell. Apparently his biggest issue, he had no problem with the nipples on the bat suit, from what I understand.
Yeah, at the time he didn't really think, he was kind of surprised that blew up to become as much of a big deal. But then when he thought about it later, and given Schumacher and all that kind of stuff, and the Schumacher's comments, I've slept with 20,000 people and all that, he's like, yeah, that kind of gave me pause to think again about why that was there. But he didn't think it needed to be blown up as big as it was. I mean, it was kind of, they kind of homaged it in, Batman Begins, even, where you have the super close-ups of Batman getting ready to go out to war type of thing. Like right when, the fear toxin is starting to infect Arkham, the whole Arkham Island, and then it cuts to, Zimmer's Batman theme as Bruce is like getting his utility belt ready and stuff like that. So they're kind of homaging that type of thing. It's like, oh, we're building suspense because Batman's coming. It's just that Schumacher shoehorns in these tight, like, crotch, ass, and nipple shots because, oh, I'm just doing the human form. It's like, really? Then how come we don't see all the other shots, like, on their bat or anything like that, So, yeah, and I think Chris O'Donnell had a fun time with it, He's had a big career since then, mostly on television, but...
Well, and, yeah. And is he still on NCIS Los Angeles?
I think so, if the show is still going.
If it's still on, if LL Cool J is still there, he probably is too. Then we get to, right, and Edge of Time is here. Hey, Edge of Time. And you know what? We should stop calling them bat nipples. We should just call them bipples. I agree, Edge of Time. Then we get to George Clooney, and the big thing is no differentiation of voice, not really doing the action scenes. Still early on in his acting career, where he mostly just waggles his head and looks down and looks back up and wistfully half smiles. This is one that I don't know. Do I like George Clooney as Batman? I like George Clooney. I don't think I like George Clooney as Batman. Like when he shows up and he's like, "Hi, Freeze, I'm Batman." Like that could have come out of a cartoon.
Yeah.
There was no weight, no gravitas to it. He may be charming, but he didn't have the gravitas for Batman.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, top billing. The second time that the top billing has gone to the not Batman, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Honestly, considering the praise that was given to Nicholson, the critical acclaim that was given to maybe not the audience acclaim to DeVito and Pfeiffer in Returns, the money-making acclaim that came to Jim Carrey, I think that the ego of Arnold Schwarzenegger wanted to be the bad guy in a Batman movie so that he could be relevant to the culture again. Almost like, I don't know, any other aging star who was going to be in the Batman 66 show.
Okay, and I think another thing which drove this, I was just looking it up to find the quote, but
Yep.
The merchandise, franchising and merchandise had not been considered an important aspect of Batman 89's release, but after merchandise contributed about $500 million to its $1.5 billion total earnings, it was prioritized for Batman Returns. Hence why when the Returns didn't give them the merchandising money they were looking for at the box office, they just doubled down on Forever and Batman and Robin, because they knew the potential was there from all the merchandising tie-ins for Batman 89, which is, I think, another big driving force for why these movies went the direction that they did. Which is why I'm kind of skeptical that, yes, Joel Schumacher was very humble and taking all responsibility. Akiva Goldsman took responsibility as the writer, but I'm like, they still wouldn't have let you do that if that's not what they wanted you to do. Sort of like when J.J. Abrams came in and turned Force Awakens into basically Star Wars the remake. It's like, as much as that aggrieves me as a Star Wars fan, he did what they wanted them to do, what they wanted him to do. So I can't put all the blame on his shoulders for that. So in that way, I think the studio and certain executives who are going to remain nameless because they don't want to identify themselves are a bit more responsible for that as well. Then it's not all on like Schumacher and Goldsman's shoulders for this. Although it's nice of them to be taking responsibility for it. Even though I think it's not necessary. I mean, people understand what was going on at the time, again, with the merchandising stuff, and the fact that they're still apologizing for it 20 years later. It's like, come on, you don't need to do that anymore. It's like the initial apology tour was in summer 2005 when Batman Begins came along, and as far as I'm concerned, they could have just ended it there. Because I remember I think the documentary was Shadows of the Bat. It's done in like, I think it's a 6-part documentary going over each of the Batman movie. Each part is covering a different Batman movie, and Schumacher was talking about, he's like, look, we just wanted to make a good movie. I didn't want to make it bad. It just, we did what we did.
Well, and I think that in terms of didn't Nicholson, he didn't get a front up paycheck. He went for the profit of the movie and a portion of the merchandising.
I believe so. Yeah. Because Batman 89 made $411 million in box office. Merchandising, and I'm not sure where it comes from. Hollywood Reporter, so I'm not sure where they're getting the 1.5 number for total earnings, because I'm guessing that's a combination of theatrical box office at 411 million plus merchandising, which it said was 500, plus probably rentals and VHS sales, which are not counted as part of box office, those numbers. And I'm guessing that's how they got up to around 1.5. But he probably did negotiate for that, because I mean, then again, that was also the era where they used to hand out these obscenely huge paychecks just up front for movies. Like certain actors could command $20 million. Nowadays, it only happens if you're in like a Netflix movie. The studios don't do that anymore, which is why you have to make sure you negotiate. If you're big enough of a star, you can negotiate for gross points. Whereas if you negotiate for net points, you're not going to get anything because of Hollywood accounting. So yeah, I think he did that. And he was also instrumental in getting DeVito to accept the role of the Penguin, because they had so many people they were looking at, like even Marlon Brando, or one of my personal favorites, Bob Hoskins, who I thought would have made a great Penguin. They were looking at the time as well. And yeah, because it's a huge paycheck, and you can get, merchandising was practically a given at that time. So they just decided to go all in on merchandising. And I get it. It's a company. Its job is to make money for the shareholders, but they seem to take a long time to figure out that you can make a lot of that money if you just make a movie that is true to your characters and has a good story to tell. And which is why I'm also kind of surprised with the Burton movies, for him to be a guy who's so much more interested in the freaks. It's like, well, you could easily have portrayed Batman in that light and given him a lot to do in that film here. Whereas I would argue that Schumacher doesn't seem to have much interest in Bruce Wayne or Batman as a character either, because of how stale, it was in Batman and Robin. It's like, it felt like you could have just made the costume look like anything, because there was just such a stale, hollow performance. I was not a big fan of Val Kilmer either.
Well, at least Val Kilmer still was carrying around that trauma in the way he presented himself. Whereas, and I think there was a moment in the commentary for Batman and Robin where Schumacher is pretty much saying, well, this doesn't make any sense. This is all just superhero comic book stupid stuff of trying to reposition satellites and moving planets and shifting sun. Actually, wait, they did that in a couple of James Bond movies, didn't they? Speaking of comic book movies. And I was like, whoa, dude, I guess you did kind of think you were making a coloring book version of a James Bond movie. That's why you didn't necessarily need anything more than good looks and charm in your leading man for this.
That reminds me, it even starts out like that when they're taking off from the Batcave in the Batmobile, and Alfred's like channeling Q. He's like, bring it back in one piece, sir. Like, bring it this time in one, and that's, and it's like, oh, a new villain. It's like, yeah, it's totally James Bond.
Yeah. So it is, I don't know. I think when you go darker, not so dark, then you get sky flowers of fireworks, essentially. Yeah. And I think that's where it went. And I think it's somewhere that the audience didn't want to go back to, considering the way that people had said, you can do Batman like Michael Keaton, like Tim Burton, like Danny DeVito, and and Jack Nicholson, that whole thing. It doesn't have to be Biff Pow's sock. It can actually be something that with weight. And to go back to something that's more neon and goofy and cartoon special effects and whatnot, I don't think the audience wanted to slide back that far.
Yeah.
Tom Jr. Jackson says, even the Clooney Batman Funko has nipples. Well, as long as you have the O'Donnell to go with it. That was something in terms of the nipples. And I said this last week when I was looking forward to Alicia Silverstone as Batgirl, is that they did have to tone down. They didn't realize they were going to bring in Batgirl for Batman and Robin, but then Joel Schumacher was like, yep, I knew I couldn't put nipples on Batgirl's suit, so we had to just sort of do cups. There's a bustier. It's not just in-your-face lady nipples. And I was like, all right, fine. Still, part of the reason why I was there. Anyway, Cinema Go says, I think they wanted Clooney to play Seth Gecko again, but that sure didn't happen. That's too bad. Although, I don't know.
Remind me, who's Seth Gecko?
From Dusk Till Dawn. He was it's Seth and Richie Gecko.
I keep forgetting that character's name. Well, maybe that's what they wanted, because you're right, that sure didn't happen. I didn't think about that performance at all while watching the film.
Yeah, and that would be, but even then, I don't know. I don't think you can just evoke that performance without the writing and direction to back it up. Like, I think, and again, not just to get on the cape of Clooney. He was my late 90s through the 2000s matinee idol kind of guy. Square jaw, rough and tumble, snarky and charming. And I was like, yeah, that guy's cool. But I don't think that he's infallible. And I think that there are movies that I've seen that he's been meh, or not even meh. It's just like same character as the last movie, same characters. Like Michael Clayton and the guy from Up in the Air, Ryan from Up in the Air, could have been the same character. One's just more in trouble.
That's kind of like my critique of him in general. I think he plays the same character in every movie, but every like sort of like there's a way you play sad, a way you play angry, or a way you play happy, and those all seem like variations of the same character. If he's playing somebody depressed, it feels like a depressed version of like Danny Ocean or Seth or whatever. And that's not entirely a bad thing that you play the same character in every movie. If it works, then it works. There are character actors who made their whole careers on playing the same type of role over and over again. Because when people think of like great actors, I don't ever really think Clooney. I mean, I think of Clooney more like, he's celebrity status, but I don't think of him as, exceptional actor. Like, I think Brad Pitt's a better actor than George Clooney. I mean, he has more range anyway, but it was like, okay, But like you're saying, they were casting people who were hot at the time to play these roles. So,
well, yeah, and again, it was all just intended to be a giant spectacle and a big blockbuster. I don't think it was meant. This is the opposite of Oscar bait.
Right, because it's funny, because in the Burton movies, they were still looking for good actors to play the role. Like, they auditioned multiple people. Like, again, the laundry list of people they were looking for the Penguin, as high as, again, Marlon Brando, Bob Hoskins, Dustin Hoffman was their first choice. And all these people, like, Jesus, they actually tried, when they were casting, they were actually thinking about that. Or, like, when they cast initially Annette Bening to play Catwoman, and then she got pregnant, so then they cast Michelle Pfeiffer. But they were still looking at good actors. And then when they moved towards the merchandising angle with the Schumacher movies, it's like, well, to sell merchandise, we need it to be popular. To make it popular, it's got to be less dark, and we need to cast popular people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what it was about, like the popular club, with the exception of Michael Goff and Pat Hingle, who were brought back from previous films.
Right. And I don't even want to get into and there's virtually no reference to anything previous. Yeah, aside from the presence of the actors from the previous film. So,
right.
But yeah, this is just sort of I would even consider these four movies, despite the fact that they came out of the same era and they are loosely connected, the first two, the second two, and then somewhat of the Venn diagram in the middle, where Burton is producing for
Yeah.
forever.
Well, I know the Batman '89 comic that they put out was a direct continuation of the Burton films and ignores the Schumacher timeline entirely. It says, yeah, that's something completely different. It's not part of this. And so, and I don't think they really regarded that. I think that the attitude with the Schumacher films is, well, the audience has seen the previous two movies. They know Batman's origin story. We don't need to go over it again, but we're not going to reference those films either because we don't want to. Even the design of Gotham is very different in the Schumacher films, so it's almost like it's a different continuity, but they just don't need to say it. Sort of like, in the MCU, they didn't feel the need to go over Spider-Man's origin again because the audience had already seen that with Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield in the last 10 years. It's like, do we need to go over that again with Tom Holland? One, nah. Seems the same thing's going on with Schumacher. So clearly, this is a whole different type of vibe in every sense of the word. Like, even though they teased Catwoman is going to come back at the end of Batman Returns, nope, she don't come back. And so it's like they know who they are. We'll just kind of, in a sense, break the fourth wall, and who these people are. We're not going to go over the origins again. Just here you go. Here's a new continuity, and that seemed to be what they're doing.
Yeah, and I just sort of see this as an era, and open and close, that started with great heights and fizzled out, and they never made any more Batman movies after this for 10 years. 8 years. Well, I rounded.
Well, technically 6, because it was 6 years later that they started pre-production on Batman Begins, but took 8 years until the same month, by the way, as well. The Batman, this movie came out in June '97, and then Begins was also June '05. So a lot of these films were, Batman Returns and Batman Forever are also June releases, which is funny. Nowadays, you don't see big blockbusters released in June. It's usually May and then July.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, either kick off the season or cement the power of it in the middle. But even then, well, yeah. I don't know. I'm still discombobulated with release dates and such. There are things I still don't understand why, speaking of superhero movies, why we're getting Quantumania in February. February is supposed to be a graveyard.
It was, but then I think Black Panther changed that when it made 1.3 billion. And they were testing the waters to see, can you release it? Kind of like, even going back further, when they put Winter Soldier at the beginning of April, and that movie made a ton of money, and it's like, oh, we're catching on to the idea that we can actually release a good movie in what is traditionally a bad month, as long as it's marketed well and if it's a good movie. And that's kind of starting to change the lens. Kind of like January. I mean, yeah, January for the most part is still the month for wide releases for Oscar bait films that had limited releases in December to qualify for awards, as well as garbage movies that you see on like a Friday and you forget them by Saturday morning. And that's kind of like what February does. But I think another reason February is getting movies like that is because rom-coms have sort of fallen off the face of the earth and have become more of, like streaming movies rather than theatrically released. And so it's opening the door. Like February used to be nothing but crappy rom-coms, and now you're getting, bigger movies. So I think that's kind of part of it.
Or but even just comedies. I think the last big comedy that I heard about was Jackass something or other.
Jackass Forever in last February. And then the last rom-com that I remember being heavily marketed was the Bros movie in September, but that tanked, even though I heard it was good. But and then Tom says, regarding our conversation about the comic, he says, yeah, that's true. I have the Batman '89 comic, the entire graphic novel. Yes, I intend to get that sometime because that actually sounds like it would be pretty cool. As well as the new Christmas book themed after Batman Returns that was put out last month. One Demented Christmas or something, whatever it's called. So that's what's it called? It's but it is kind of those movies, the Burton films anyway, and that whole era is kind of making a comeback right now. I don't see Batman Forever and Batman and Robin getting a reappraisal in a positive light as much as it could.
No, I don't think so either. I'm not, and yeah, like I think that the long lasting legacy of these movies are going to be the style, the architecture, the tone that Burton brought to it, and the gravitas and lore that was respected by the Bruce Timm, Kevin Conroy animated series, which was inspired in somewhat of a reflection of both Batman's origins with the aesthetic of Burton's world. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah. And the title of that book was Batman Returns: One Dark Christmas Eve, the Illustrated Holiday Classic by Ivan Cohen. But that's crazy that this stuff is kind of, reprised. And then, I mean, I think that people have an even softer spot for Batman 66 in that whole Adam West era because of how great of an ambassador Adam West has been for Batman and how fun Adam West has been in general. Whereas even if the actors like Clooney and stuff didn't bag on this movie as much as they do, I still don't think it would get reappraised in a positive way.
Yeah.
I do think it's a easier watch than the actual Batman 66 movie because that was just really slow and was kind of like one set piece kind of after another. And this is a sense the same, but it was visually more interesting at least and colorful. And yet Uma Thurman at least hamming it up, whereas 66 I thought was a bit of a chore. So I'd rank it higher than that. But that's we forgot. We got to give this movie Batarangs, Scott.
Yeah. Oh, the Batarangs. You know what? I'm going lower than Batman 66 on this one. I'm giving this guy a 4. I'm giving Batman and Robin a 4.
What did I give Batman 66? I gave it a
3.
I gave it a 3. Batman and Robin, I guess I'll give that a 4. It was still mildly entertaining. And if there was a friend here to watch it with me, we'd be cracking a million jokes and laughing our asses off, which is at least there's something there for it. I mean, in a sense, the rating should be lower. It's only got a 12% average on Rotten Tomatoes. Another place I've had that says, I gave Forever a 5 out of 10 because at least there's a character arc through line with the Riddler. But I almost feel like I want to give both of those movies lower ratings. And like usual, we'll revisit all our Batarangs when we're done with the series and we'll give another assessment. But right now, I'd give it a 4. Because I gave 66 a 3. I gave Forever a 5, so I'll just give this a 4.
Mm-hmm. And
our theory from last week that this was going to be better than Batman Forever, like we thought, did not pan out.
Did not pan out. But the reason I give this one lower than 66 is just because I really enjoyed the theater of the absurd, like of 66, and this one felt like, I don't know, it was on the same ladder as Batman Forever, but it had taken 3 rungs down. Jill says, this is a disjointed, insane cacophony of scenes stitched together. I had to watch it at 2 times speed. I had more fun due to that and Ivy pairing with Bane. How many unresolved plot points can we add? 4 out of 10. Plenty. We can have so many more unresolved plot points. Why were you carrying around the cure for McGregor syndrome in your gauntlet?
To keep it close to the vest, I guess, because of how precious that is to him. Doesn't want to lose it.
Maybe it was just the most reliable refrigerator he had, and it had to be cool.
And given that poison ivy's plants kind of grow at an exceedingly rapid rate, wouldn't they keep growing throughout the state? Like, what's exactly stopping them? Same with all the plants that got unleashed in South America. Isn't that going to take over the continent? You know, it's like it's just like the thing. It's just going to keep infecting everything, and nothing's going to stop it. And Bane, he's still alive. He just got drained of the venom, and he is a serial killer. So once he recovers from that initial shock, he could get back up and, you know, go kill people again. 2 different actors playing that character as well, because it wasn't fake muscles, like real. Like, one was a wrestler, the main guy, and then the other was a different actor entirely. But the wrestler, he died less than 2 months after the film came out. Steroids. Heart attack. That shocked the fellow cast members. And this was also back in an era where movies had longer theatrical runs because home media wasn't as like what it is today. Like, I know the Batman Returns was in theaters for 18 weeks, which was considered lesser than they thought it would be. Batman 89 was like 6 or 7 months practically. This movie, I think, was a bit less. Like, it was still going on through August or whatever, but it wasn't. The drop off was a lot sharper and a lot faster. It was like there because maybe it's cheaper to put it in theater. But like in Batman Returns case, I know they actually cheapened the cost of the VHS and Laserdisc because to entice people to buy it because it had underperformed at the box office and they were trying to entice people to do that. I'm not sure if they did the same for Batman and Robin, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me either. Well, yeah, they're just trying to recoup, and no one wanted the Happy Meal cups if there were such beasts.
That's kind of why I'm surprised that Warner Brothers did a pretty good job at these legacy documentaries, making of documentaries for all four of these films. Just a few years ago when they put out the Blu-ray box set and the 4K box set. And I'm like, wow, they actually went all out with really professional and like a good documentary, not the crap that you see nowadays, which are like the EPK features where everybody's just like, oh, they're amazing and they're so cool, they're great, they're amazing. No, these were like really good bonus features. It felt like a throwback to the stuff you would get on movies like Jurassic Park or Lord of the Rings. It's like, wow. And I wonder if they did that just to help entice sales. Again, still trying to get that money back.
Well, when it comes to those special features, I prefer an honest retrospective and look back. And Warner Brothers did a great job. I don't know if they have. Is there 4K for the Superman? The Christopher Reeve.
I'm not aware of there being a 4K yet. I think they might have done one for Superman 2. I'm not sure. It would make sense for them to do it sometime because this year is the 45th anniversary of the original Dick Donner Superman. So
yes,
maybe there might be a 4K.
But I'm just thinking of the special features that were on the Blu-ray when it was the Superman Legacy set that was 1, 2, 3, 4 and Returns, and they were of a similar situation that are like, we had a really fun time on the first one, and then there was production troubles in the second one and the third one, and what made it so that people would come back for fourth, and this is how. And then obviously Robert Meyer Burnett did the special features on Returns, but yeah, and it seemed like a more honest production diary as opposed to, as you mentioned, an electronic press kit.
Yeah, and so. Which is why I was kind of upset that when I got the that 4K Steelbook set up there, it didn't include the Blu-rays with all those documentaries on it. It does have the audio commentaries, though. Apparently, when I pre-ordered it, it said it was going to include 4K and Blu-ray. I was like, oh, good, I get all the bonus features. And then they changed the listing like the day before, and it already shipped. It's like, God damn it. And they didn't cheapen the cost after that either. I'm like, oh, fuckers. So if there's ever like a big like flash sale or something, I might get the box set just to have. I think most of them might have been uploaded on YouTube. Actually, I'll double check. But
I tried to find Joel Schumacher's apology so I could have that clip for us, and I couldn't find the full interview from the special features, and I was hoping to, but I couldn't get it. I found the clip, but it wouldn't let me clip the clip.
I think I remember seeing that recently as well. I wonder if it was in the Batmobile documentary. Because in that movie, they go over all the Batmobile designs from each of the Batman movies, and they talk about the Batman movie, but maybe and maybe not. Because I seem to remember seeing a very high quality transfer of that, like not a crappy YouTube thing. Like it was, like not a crappy YouTube upload, like a really nice one, and that must be on a Blu-ray or something somewhere around here. I don't know. But yeah, that was also a great documentary I would recommend people watch at some point. That would be, you could do a whole episode on that, even just on how cool the Batmobile is. That's something that the guys at DC say every time that they find out there's going to be a new Batman movie, the first thing the new director wants to do is redesign the Batmobile. And they're like really excited about that. And then every time they find out who the actors are going to be playing the villains, they give them comics to draw from. Whether they read it or not, is up for grabs, but they still offer.
It is, well, and I guess they just did announce there is going to be the Matt Reeves Batman 2.
Yeah, they're working on that. First, next month they start production on the Penguin series, which is going to, initially it was going to be a prequel series, but now it's a sequel series, which I think is better. I loved Robin Lord Taylor as the Penguin in the Gotham TV series. I think he was one of the only good things about that show. And granted, that's tonally very different, but it's like I've already seen Penguin rising up. I don't need to see that again. So changing the Colin Farrell series being a sequel is going to be great, but it's not going to drop until next year at some point, which is probably to, slake fans' lust for more Batman until I think the movie will probably be 2025 because Matt Reeves is now writing the sequel.
Right. Well, I know there's always Batman on somewhere. I don't mind.
Oh, yeah, there's still tons of Batman stuff that I haven't watched. Like I haven't watched the new Long Halloween, but I'm told that it's actually very accurate to the story. Like one of the things that the animated adaptations have done, which has kind of bugged me, is that they changed the source material a lot. Like they did that a lot with Hush, changing the ending, and the Killing Joke, adding like a superfluous 40 minutes onto the front end that has nothing to do with the Killing Joke. And so when they said the Long Halloween, I heard is accurate to it. I kind of got excited about that, but I'll watch it eventually. Cause, I got HBO Max, so I can watch all that stuff. So where does this leave us for? Are there any more comments? First of all,
well, Edge of Time has said that they like Batman. It's all good.
Yeah.
Next week we are doing Mask of the Phantasm.
Yes.
Or just Mask of the Phantasm.
Well, just Mask of the Phantasm, because that's a movie.
Okay. Then we're going to Kevin Conroy it up. We're going to get a little Mark Hamill. And it's going to be in the style of Bruce Timm with Lois Lane as somebody. But I suppose if there is nothing else and there are no more, if there are no objections, Kat, I never said thank you.
And you'll never have to.